College baseball is now less than 24 hours away, and on this edition of the Stingray Show, we will get you ready for the opening day tomorrow in the SEC and around the country. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we get you guys primed and ready for opening day 2021 of college baseball.
The Dogs and Stingray are coming for you.
This is Stephen Ray, a.k.a. Stingray, coming to you live from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Good afternoon, Mr. Feinbaum. Stingray here, and I'm about to shoot the bull with you like all the Auburn students do down at Auburn.
Worst defense ever!
So without further ado, here is the biggest frigid all across the Southeast. But what is not going to be frigid is when the bats start flying tomorrow around this time. College baseball will be underway, and tonight on the Stingray Show, we're going to be joined by the one and only Ben McDonald to get you caught up and get you excited for the opening day of SEC baseball tomorrow. So without further ado, here is our interview with the one and only Ben McDonald. Heath, it is baseball time again here in the SEC and across the landscape of America. Man, are you excited about it? Because I am a big college baseball fan.
Steven, the only time of year my life makes sense is when baseball season starts, brother.
Absolutely. And actually, you have the guest today is one of your idols when you were growing up, correct?
Yeah, well, I think everybody in the neighborhood, everybody everywhere knew who our next guest is. Absolutely.
All right, so as you can see, I have the LSU shirt on. I've got the LSU sweater behind me. So we are talking about an LSU great. So without further ado, Heath, tell everybody who we have on the show today.
Well, you'll see him on the road to Omaha on several SEC networks, SEC Network and the ESPN networks. You will also know him from his Major League Baseball. He was the #1 overall pick. He was also a Golden Spikes Award winner. He was also part of the gold medal team for the United States, the one and only Ben McDonald. Ben, how are you tonight?
Good, and the reason why I'm doing good is we're getting closer and closer to college baseball, and hopefully we're going to play the whole season. It was a tough go around for everybody last year. Obviously, when the season got canceled, you feel terrible for the kids in high school and both the college game. So I know everybody's looking forward. I was over at LSU today watching those guys work out a little bit. Got my first look at those guys. I live 20 minutes from the university, but it was a beautiful day today, and the crack of the bat and guys running and fielding just kind of got me in the mood all over again. So I'm looking forward to the 19th. It's coming up shortly, guys, and I'm telling you what, we're going to have a great year in college baseball this year.
Ben, is it safe to say that this is possibly, if not will be, the absolute greatest year of college baseball due to so many guys came back? There was a short MLB draft. So many guys came back. There's going to be so many teams in the SEC and all across the nation. This will be their best team ever, and some guys may not even get out of the regional.
No, that's a true statement. And, yes, to answer your question, we're going to see more talent in college baseball this year probably than we have ever seen. And not just at the Division I level, D3, NAIA, junior colleges, all of that trickled down. As you mentioned, because of the 5-round draft and everybody got a year of eligibility across the board in every division, it became a number crunch in some situations where some kids were let go from a D1 level and they trickled down. And now junior college play, NAIA, D3 is all just through the roof and more talent there. And when you talk about Division I level, look, You got 5 recruiting classes on campus now, right? You got the incoming freshmen. Everybody got a year of eligibility back. You get a five-round draft. And so now so many teams are stacked. And I sit there and I look at LSU today and I go, dadgum, this team's going to be pretty good. But then I start to remember what Mississippi State has and what Vanderbilt has and what Ole Miss has across the board. And the truth of the matter is, Friday and Saturday nights in the SEC from a pitching standpoint is going to be so talented. It's going to be scary. And even Sundays in a lot of roles, So you can't look at just one team because you realize everybody's going to kind of be like that. And we talk about the SEC. We talk about the #1 conference by far in the country, right? I mean, there's 9 of 14 SEC teams ranked in the top 25 right now. Florida, of course, leads the way because of the experience they have on the pitching staff. But look, it's going to be neat to see how all this unfolds. And as you guys know, there's so many variables this year. We see what's on paper right now, but then there's going to be COVID. It's going to happen. Like some team is going to pop a positive test. Somebody's Friday night guy is going to pop a positive and somewhere along the way. It's just going to happen, unfortunately. So the teams that are deep from a pitching standpoint and the teams that are deep from a position player standpoint will be the teams that keep chugging on because, unfortunately, it's just kind of where we live today with COVID. So it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't, but we're going to see some positives along the way, and some teams are going to lose some players for, possibly for a weekend series.
Going ahead and let's talk about some of your playing days before we jump into the SEC slate of games. You actually won the Golden Spikes Award. Talk about that season for us, please.
Well, that was my junior year at LSU, and I had, my sophomore year ended, and I was one of the few underclassmen that got invited to go try out for the Olympic team in 1988. I was a sophomore, and it was Tom Goodman was another. It was just a couple of us, but most of the guys were all juniors. And that draft, the 88 draft, Andy Bennis was the #1 pick, and then Robin Ventura, which you guys I know probably remember, Andy Bennis, all those guys, Jim Abbott. All those guys were on that team. And so I got to go as an underclassman and kind of stack up against the guys that just got drafted. And when you go to a level like that, you don't know how good you are. I was a little bit nervous. I started to wonder when I first got there, do I belong with these guys? But I think as an athlete and as a competitor, I think those things cross your mind from time to time. Kind of like when you go from high school to a big D1 program like a Mississippi State. I think some of those freshmen there and at LSU and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, I think you get on campus, you go, okay, do I really belong? But then you start to measure your skills up against what's out there, and you start to say, okay, I felt like I remember I'm saying, okay, Andy Bennis was the #1 pick in the country, and hey, my fastball is just as good as his. My breaking ball is actually better than his. I think I'm going to be all right, And so I go back to LSU my junior year, and I'm projected to be the #1 pick overall that year. And so when you're projected to be before the season even starts, kind of like Kumar Rocker is right now at Vanderbilt, there's a lot of pressure to go perform because people are looking at you going, hey, he's going to be the #1 pick. So I can remember games where I'd throw 9 innings and throw a complete game and strike out 13, but then give up 3 runs. And some reporter goes, well, what happened? You had a bad game today. And I would go, wait a minute, I just punched out 13 against the #2 team in the country and gave up 3 runs, and you're saying it's a bad game? And so those were difficult for me. I had to live up to some expectations, but I had a really good junior year. I struck out an SEC record, I think 202 that year, and went on to win the Golden Spikes and became the #1 pick in the country that year by the Baltimore Orioles, And so it was a rewarding year in a lot of ways. But to be honest, guys, and I've said this many times, it was a stressful year for me to try to live up to those expectations and to try to pitch LSU to the College World Series, which we were able to do with some other guys. We didn't win the College World Series that year, but still in all, it was a good year and a rewarding year in a lot of ways.
And a follow-up to that real quick, what was the most exciting game that you ever played in at LSU?
Well, if I had to put a finger on one, the old Winn-Dixie Classic in the Superdome where the Louisiana teams used to go and play like the Texas teams or the Oklahoma teams. There'd be 3 Texas teams come in and play 3 Louisiana teams. And it was Oklahoma came in one year. That was my junior year. And Oklahoma State was ranked #1 in the country. And they were a really good hitting team. They were averaging a bunch of runs per game. That was about halfway through the year, and I think I struck out 14 and threw like a 3-hitter and shut them out. And that really kind of sealed the deal. And I hit 100 miles an hour on the radar gun for the first time. And I think at that point in time, that might have sealed the deal as far as being the number 1 overall pick. That game ranks right there with any of them. But certainly the Texas A&M series that same year in the regional, when LSU goes into A&M, who by far at the time was the number 1 team in the country, and we upset them and beat them 2 in a row on the final day of that regional tournament to go to the College World Series. That one's right there with a close second, too, those 2 games over in Aggie land for sure.
Ben, why don't they not do the Winn-Dixie Classic in the Superdome anymore? I think it was 96 or 97 the last year they did it. Do you have any idea why they don't play that game anymore?
I don't know why. I felt like that was such a good tournament. Now,
Yeah.
they started in recent years. They moved to Houston, and they're kind of doing some stuff in Houston now, which I think State's going to this year, I believe it is. And so that's a really cool deal. But I love that early season matchups of some really good teams in a professional environment, in a big-time environment. I think that's a really cool for the kids to get to experience a big league ballpark, but also play some wonderful competition right out of the chute. And the tip of the cap to those schools that do that. I mean, there's some schools out there that don't play a big schedule before SEC time rolls around, but there's also some schools that really go out there and try to play some really quality opponents early to kind of see where they are as a benchmark as a team and where their weaknesses are and where they really need to improve on.
Now, Ben, a lot of people don't know this, and when I was doing my research for this interview, you played basketball at LSU. Talk about that.
Well, you're right. A lot of people have forgotten, but I was actually more highly recruited out of high school to play basketball than I was baseball. I mean, I was always going to do both and let one win out over the other eventually. But I only visited 3 schools. I went to LSU, of course, and of course I went to Mississippi State and took a visit there, and then went to Texas and took a visit as well, because all 3 wanted me to play basketball and baseball. And so I loved my experience. I mean, my freshman year at LSU, I got to go to the Elite 8 with Dale Brown, the NCAA tournament, and play in a College World Series all in the same year. So how many 18-year-old kids get to experience that? So I loved my time on the basketball court. I played all my freshman year, and I got out to baseball because we made that deep run into the NCAA tournament. I didn't get out to baseball until at the end of March, and so I missed a lot of the college baseball season. And I had told, Coach Bertman came to me and said, listen, you got a chance of making this 88 Olympic team next summer, but you got to be out here for the full year in order to do that, to kind of show everybody what you can do. So at the end of my freshman year, I went and told Dale Brown, the basketball coach, I said, Coach, I love you. I love basketball, but my fastball picked up 7 miles an hour during my freshman year, and I went from 89, 90 when it started, and I was at 97 during the summer at the Alaskan Summer League. And at that point, I kind of knew baseball was going to be my chance to make it to the next level. So I went and told Dale Brown, I said, Coach, I love you, but I want to make this Olympic team, and I think baseball is going to be my future. Of course, he argued with me, and that was that. He kept me on basketball scholarship anyway. He said, son, if you change your mind, I'm going to leave you on basketball scholarship. Well, it was about October 1st, rolled around, the phone rings, and it's Dale Brown on the other line. He said, Ben, he said, the entire team has come down with mono. He said, we don't even have enough players to practice. Can you please come back out for basketball? And this is my sophomore year. I said, Coach, I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to go back and play. I'll play October, November, December, but January 1st, I'm going back out to baseball when we crank it up. So I use it as a way to get my legs in great shape, get up and down the court, and that really prepared me and got me ready for the baseball season. So I helped them out until everybody got back and got healthy, and then went on out to baseball. And then that's kind of like they say, that's where the story ends, I guess, or begins.
A quick follow-up to that. You were on that team with Chris Jackson, weren't you?
Chris Jackson was the year after me. So I was on the team with really a bunch of no-name guys: Nikita Wilson, Anthony Wilson, Jose Vargas, Darryl Joe. Really a bunch of guys that didn't even play in the NBA, but a team that really came together at the right time and made a deep run into the NCAA tournament. So I think Ricky Blanton had a cup of coffee. Then Nikita Wilson maybe a cup of coffee in the NBA, but nobody had substantial careers at all. But it was just a good group of guys. It was college basketball. We just seemed to peak at the right time.
Well, let's go on ahead and talk about some of the teams that you feel like could be really good this year? Obviously, let's start right here in Tuscaloosa. The University of Alabama had a really good start to the season before it was canceled last year. How do you feel like the Crimson Tide are going to do this year? Because as you know, it has been a long time since they have been decent in baseball.
Yeah, no, it has been a long time. And they showed something last year, and you wonder if they can continue that momentum. They have a real guy that can really pitch it. Prelib, I think, is his name, and he is as good as anybody. I think in the SEC last year in scoring runs, so the offense took a tick up too. So I think they're going to be much better, and I think that's what you're going to see from the SEC. It almost seems like there used to be a big gap between 1 and 14, but that gap is closing now. And those teams that have been down at the bottom, like the Alabamas of the world for so long, those teams have been gaining ground, in my opinion. And where it used to be some slouches on the weekend where you could almost say, okay, we're going to show up and win 2 out of 3 for sure. You can't say that anymore in the SEC because the Tennessees of the world and the Alabamas of the world and teams that have been down at the bottom, even South Carolina's had a couple of off years, but watch out for them this year too. They're going to be much better as well. So there will be no breaks in the SEC. I mean, some experts are predicting a record 12 teams to make the NCAA tournament out of 14 this year. That's how deep the SEC is this year.
Do you feel like Alabama will be one of those teams?
Personally, I don't think they will, just because I don't think that they're deep enough. While they have some really good pitchers up front and they have some good position players, this SEC schedule, guys, it's going to be a gauntlet this year. When you've got to run up against the teams that are out there, we mentioned it, there's 9 of 14 that are ranked right now. It's going to be really tough because it happens in football where they just beat up on each other. You beat up on each other, and these teams they end up going down. If you would take Alabama and put Alabama in the ACC or the Big 10 or the Big 12, they're going to make the NCAA tournament. There's no doubt in my mind. But you put them in the SEC, and it's a whole different ball game, And so I don't know if they get there. I think they're going to be right there. They're really going to have a shot. It could be some series that turn on a hinge on one run here or there, and they could be a team that misses out by 1 run or 1 win or something like that. So we'll see what happens to Alabama, but I think they have a shot of getting there. I just don't predict them getting in at this point.
Right.
Ben, if I set the over-under for SEC teams making Omaha at 2.5, are you taking the over or the under?
That's a great question. It is so hard, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to take the over. I think there's 3 teams, and I can't tell you what those 3 teams are, but if the teams play well enough, they're going to host their regional. They're going to host their super regional. And when you're hosting regionals and super regionals, we know what the success rates are. Yeah. And so I think we'll have 4 national seeds probably in the SEC, 3 for sure, and I expect those 3 teams, whoever they are, I think will be good enough to win their own super regionals and make it to Omaha.
Ben, to follow that up a little bit, I was kind of hoping for and a little disappointed. I know that the idea was kicked around of having 4-game SEC series on the weekend, and I was hoping for that. They were talking about an all-SEC schedule, 4 games. We'll start Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was hoping for it just because I think this year is going to be the greatest college baseball year, and you put that in there, it would have been just great baseball for 4 days. We missed out on that. Going back to our traditional 3-game weekend, what teams do you think are stacked with pitching that are going to really just kind of mow things down here in the SEC?
Well, I think you got to begin with Florida. I mean, because of the experience, right? I mean, you get Leftwich back, you get Tommy Mace back, guys that in a normal year would have been gone and drafted, but because their numbers were a little bit high and we only had a 5-round draft, they show up back at school. Well, what makes them special? What makes them special is experience in the SEC. So they have been through the fires of the SEC. They know what it's about. They have pitched a couple years in it, and they get it. Now, there's a deep bullpen, too. It's more arms on campus. For Florida, some big-time arms in the back end of that bullpen. So when you talk about pitching, I think you start at Florida. But having said that, you can go to Mississippi State in a heartbeat, and you talk about Sarantola and McLeod, and you talk about Bednar and others that are down there. I love the back end of that bullpen. It seems like Spencer Price and Riley Self has been there for 10 years, it seems like.
Forever.
There's a lot of experience at the back end. Now, the question mark for Mississippi State is, of those 3 starters we mentioned, and we know will be the starters, they've not really set in the fire yet of the SEC. They've not been in those big-time situations yet, just like you take Hill over at LSU. I mean, here's a guy that's projected to be the 5th pick in the country this year, and he's got a total of 21 innings in his whole college career. He's never pitched an SEC inning yet. So we don't know how he's going to adapt to being in the fire. And that's why I like Florida, because those guys have been in the middle of it. They understand what this 30-game grind is about. You go over to Vanderbilt, and, of course, Kumar Rocker showed everybody his freshman year that he's as good as anybody. He's been there, too. And then you add a kid like Jack Leiter to the mix, who some people think is going to be a top 5 pick as a sophomore. They got 2 real aces up front, too. But, look, we can talk Florida. We can talk Vanderbilt. We can talk LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Don't forget about their guys either, right? I mean, Hoagland down there was a first-rounder coming out of high school. The left-hander, I can't remember his name. He's really good, too. So I think everybody's going to have the arms, man. It's just going to come down like it always does, and it's an old baseball cliche, is who doesn't kick the ball around, who makes the routine plays, and who comes up with that big hit. I see you, Stingray, but you know, who comes up with the base hit with 2 out runners on 2nd and 3rd in the 6th inning? Those big hits and making the routine play is going to be the difference maker in deciding a lot of these SEC games, because I'm telling you what, the arms in the SEC are going to be like we've never seen before. I mean, it's going to be stacked.
Well, let's talk about another team that has been down recently, that would like to get back up and really haven't made that much noise since they got into the SEC. What are your thoughts about the Missouri Tigers?
Well, Steve Beezer's doing a good job over there. I mean, he's busting it. Look, that's a tough gig. You know, I'm going to tell you, Missouri has trouble from time to time getting those big-time recruits in there. You know, when you're up against the SEC, man, it's tough. And we'll always compare it to football. You can't be kind of good in the SEC in football or baseball if you're going to compete. You got to be really good. And while I love, he's a very energetic guy, they are making strides. They are moving in the right direction, but it is just difficult in the SEC. And it's not a point of coaching. It's not a point of want to. It's a little bit down on talent. When you compare, and I'm not being ugly, but it's truthful, but when you compare Missouri from top to bottom with a Mississippi State or a Vanderbilt or a Florida, from top to bottom, they just don't have quite the caliber of athletes yet. But I think they're slowly moving in that direction. But that's the only thing that's going to separate them. They're one of those teams that, you know, probably won't get in this year. They got some talent. I mean, look, everybody's got a guy on Friday nights that can pitch. They have talent. But is that talent over the course of 30 games going to add up to them getting into the NCAA tournament?
But Missouri also has a graphic on their scoreboard that says snow delay. I don't think any of the other SEC teams have that. That hurts on recruiting, doesn't it?
That's right. You know, and look, everybody wants to get to warmer weather. Missouri, I think, is geographically the furthest team we have in the SEC going north, you know, and so it's tough. The weather's tough up there. Now, it's a beautiful facility. I did a ball game there a couple years ago, and they're doing a lot of wonderful things there in Missouri to making their field more appealable to recruits and trying to get those big-time recruits to come in there. And they're working as hard as anybody, but I think they are making strides. I just don't think they're to the caliber of the teams that are at the top of the SEC right now.
You know, you're talking about recruiting earlier. We'll forget Texas. We'll leave Texas out of this. Mississippi State and LSU. If I'm not mistaken, Dale Brown, Skip Bertman against Richard Williams and Ron Polk. What made the sell? What were they both selling to you? But why did you pick LSU?
I loved Mississippi State. I'm going to be honest with you. At the time when I came out of high school, Mississippi State had the best program in the SEC, right? They had Will Clark and Palomero and Thigpen and Brantley. They were going to the College World Series. They hadn't won it, but they were going. But they were the team in the SEC, and that's what drew me towards Mississippi State at the time. I felt like LSU's basketball program was a little bit advanced because they went to a Final Four in '86 with John Williams and Ricky Blanton and those guys. But it was I see you, Stingray. And I loved Ron Polk. Like, he is still one of my favorite people today. I still get the Christmas cards from him.
Oh, yeah.
He'll shoot me out a text occasionally. Hey, you're doing a good job on TV, whatever. And hey, you should have came to state. I still get that from him occasionally too. But at the end of the day, when you grow up 20 minutes from LSU,
Yeah.
and when you're born down here, they give you a shotgun and an LSU T-shirt. That's what you get. And you grow up, and your mom and dad has season tickets to the football games and the basketball games. And I used to get dropped off as a 12-year-old to the old Alex Box Stadium, me and a buddy by my mom, and we'd crawl, and then we'd sneak through the gate, and I'd crawl through a hole at the old Alex Box to go watch LSU play baseball. At the end of the day, it's hard to get away from home. And my senior year in high school, a guy by the name of Skip Berkman, who was in his second year at LSU, goes to the College World Series for the first time. And I go, whoa. Well, maybe this baseball program has a chance. Maybe this guy, this Berkman guy, whoever he is, who came from Miami, maybe he's going to be pretty good one day, because they just went to the College World Series. And I knew Dale Brown had been to the Final Four. So ultimately, that's what changed my mind. And, of course, being a hometown guy, it was just hard to get away out of your backyard, you know, when they want you. And I remember Dale Brown and coming into my house, and I told him, you know, and he said, Ben, he said, don't worry about being a big fish in a small pond. He said, come be a big fish in a big pond at LSU. And I love the outdoors. I like fishing and hunting. And when he said that, I went, that's my guy. That's my guy right there, you know. And so I ended up going to LSU, and, you know, right here in my backyard. Like I said, I grew up 20 minutes from university, still live 20 minutes from university. So at the end of the day, it was just hard to get away.
Right. Well, let's go in and talk about some of your pro days. What was it like moving from the college game to the pro game? Because a lot of players on football will tell you that it's a lot different. How is it different in baseball?
Well, it's and you hear them saying in football and basketball, it's a faster game. It's a much faster game. You know, and for a 21-year-old kid, you know, I got drafted in '89, and I signed in August 19th of 1989, and I was in the big league September the 1st, 11 days later. As a 21-year-old kid who didn't know anything, had never really been away from home. Now I'm playing against the best players in the whole world, and I'm up here in the big leagues. And so it was a learning process for me big time for a couple of years, adjusting to living on my own, adjusting from being so far away from home. But the biggest difference to me was just everybody's really good. Like, there's no, at the big league level, everybody can hit.
Yeah.
It's not like in college where, you know, in the SEC at the time, once you got past 1 through 5, you know, a few pitches to 6, 7, 8, 9, you could rack up some outs in a hurry. It's not that way in the big leagues. Like, they can hit 1 through 9, especially being in the American League East where I was in,
Right.
The DH. And you're playing the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Jays and the Rays. I mean, everybody's really good. And so that was what I noticed right away was mistakes don't get missed at the big league level. Like, you can make a mistake pitch in college ball and hang a breaking ball. Sometimes the guy swings through it or pops it up. Every now and then he barrels it up and hits it for a home run. But at the big league level, it seemed like your mistakes are magnified. Like, if you make a mistake and you miss, it's really magnified by these hitters at the big league level.
Wow. Ben, why number 19? What was the reason behind 19?
Well, it's what as a freshman on the baseball team in high school, they don't give you what number you want. They give you what jersey fits. Are you a medium, a large, or an extra large? And I said, at the time, I was a medium. And the coach reached in the bag. He never looked at the number. He looked at the tag and said, medium here, McDonald. He flicked me a jersey. Well, that jersey just happened to have 19 on the back of it. That's how it all got started. And so from that point forward, my freshman year on, I was number 19 all the way through. It just kind of stuck with me, not because of the number, because of the size jersey I was at the time.
If I'm not mistaken, when you went up with the Orioles, you guys were still playing in Municipal Stadium. That place was a dump, wasn't it?
Yeah, old Memorial Park. In Baltimore on 33rd Street. Yeah, you know, it was one of the older stadiums around at the time. But it was actually a pretty good park to pitch in. Like, they grew the grass pretty high on the infield. It was a little bit deeper park because everybody knows Camden Yards. Well, it's a beautiful. We moved into that in '92 and opened it up. It is a beautiful ballpark. Still to this day, it's one, in my opinion, one of the more beautiful ballparks with the warehouse out in right field and right center field, and the city looking out in center field. It's as pretty as it gets. But that park is not a whole lot of fun to pitch in. Like, that is a hitter's ballpark. And
it's a launching pad,
Yeah, I played with Cal Ripken, and Cal Ripken had he had more pull than anybody in Baltimore, so he would make sure the grass was cut really low in the infield so the balls would get through fast. I was like, Junior, come on. I said, leave something for us. We already got a high school field when it comes to dimensions out here. The ball flies out of here like it's on a jet stream. I said, at least let us grow the grass higher in the infield to give us pitchers some advantage, but he would have none of it. It was like low grass and ball flying out of the ballpark.
Hey, let me ask you this real quick. I had an old fraternity buddy of mine. He was the groundskeeper at Fenway Park, and that's when Nomar was still playing with the Red Sox. And he said he would come to us every single night. He goes, make sure it's mud before I go out there. He goes, I'm getting too old. My knees are hurting. Make sure I want it extra slow. Yeah. Did you ever do some of those things?
Yeah, look, I mean, those guys that had pull like that, they could – I don't remember Cal doing any of that kind of stuff before, but – you know, they would complain sometimes if it was too wet around home plate. They wanted the ball to bounce higher in the air so they could beat it out at first base. And like if the field wasn't right, they'd want more water or less water so the ball wouldn't bounce when they were fielding it right, you know. And so there's a lot of people that had stuff going on. But at the end of the day, there's so much going on at the big league level. I didn't worry about all that. I had a hard enough time just getting guys out. That's all I ever tried to worry about.
Well, let's talk about another team that a lot of people down south like. The Braves. How well do you feel like that they are going to do this year, and can they repeat the success that they had last year?
Well, I think so. I saw they signed their big hitter back the other day. Golly, the guy that was a free agent, he's back in their lineup. Ozona, I think, or something like that. He's back in their mix. But the Braves, I mean, Freddie Freeman had an unbelievable year last year. Dansby Swanson got off to a wonderful start, too, for the Braves. But I got to see the Braves because I was doing some Oriole games last year. Of course, they crossed over and played the Eastern teams in the National League. So the Braves actually came to Camden Yards, and I got to see them. And, you know, you got Max Fried, I think is his name, the pitcher. One of their pitchers got Soroka, got hurt early with an Achilles, I think it was. All those guys are going to be back healthy. So the Braves have plenty of offense in that lineup. There's no doubt about that. And they got some good starting pitchers. They got some real guys in front of that rotation right there. So I expect the Braves to be a force, certainly in the National League East. There's no doubt about that.
Ben, I've always heard the rumor that the talent level in AAA and Major League Baseball is no different. It's just that the consistency level with the major leagues they're a little bit better. Instead of a guy going 5 for 20 in his at bats, he's going 7 for 20.
Right.
You know, but I also will say this: I always had minor league guys tell me that who never made it big. Is that a true statement? That the talent level is just the same. It's just that you're more consistent in the major leagues.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's guys that you see at AA and AAA that you see that you think are can't miss guys in some ways, but you're right. They lose that consistency. And you may see them for a week or two, and you say that's a major league ball player. But then you come back 2 weeks later, and it looks totally different. And they would lose it at the stroke of the plate a little bit. And it would take them a long time to gather back. Big league hitters, you don't see the good ones really go on many prolonged slumps. They may be 0 for 10, maybe 0 for 3 for a couple of 3 games in a row, but then they get it back pretty quick. The difference is the minor league guys can go into a slump and not know how to get out of it. And you hear it all the time. I think from a physical standpoint, I think the talent is very close in AAA, but it's what's up here sometimes that makes the difference for a lot of guys. Can they handle failure? Can you handle success? And if you're having failure and you're failing out there, how quickly can you get yourself out of it and overcome it and not feel sorry for yourself? So I think a lot of the difference between big league pitchers and minor league pitchers is what's in between the ears and being able to flush stuff and then be able to come back and figure out what you're doing wrong and be able to quickly make those adjustments and get right back in the ball game again. I think sometimes that's what separates guys making it to the big leagues and our players having extended careers in the big leagues.
Well, let's go back to college real quick. I'm going to put you on the spot here if you don't mind. What is your favorite stadium to broadcast a game from?
Well, I'm going to tell you this. My favorite stadium is always Alex Box.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that. I just, the little bit of history there and being hometown, I'm always more comfortable there. But having said that, I called the Super Regional with State and Stanford a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I have never seen an environment like I saw in college baseball that weekend. And that last game, when they clinched it, I mean, I wish you could see it. I got goosebumps on my arm right now, Pop. That last game that we called there in that environment, and, Mangum comes up and gets the base hit, and you get the home run. It's just like you couldn't have wrote a script any better than that. And the fans were absolutely nuts that game. So that's my favorite game of all time that I ever called. There's no doubt about that. In that environment, that new ballpark. And I love what State has done out there with the left field lounge and the apartments or houses, whatever they are out there. And of course, the lofts and the scoreboards and what they've done, because it's and it was always my favorite place. I mean, in 1988, when LSU went in there and played Ron Polk, we set the attendance record at the time. There was more people showed up for that ball game than in the history of college baseball. Of course, it's been beaten since then, but that environment then was a very special environment, where those State fans, I love them to death. They are on you during the game, call you everything in the book, but then feed you in between games. And
That's what I was about to ask you. What is something that you ate after a State game?
Oh my gosh! I mean, I remember before there was a fence out there, but it was a chain link fence, and we'd go right up against the fence in between games, and they'd feed you barbecue, a little bit of. I might even have a sip of an adult beverage one time. You never know after I pitch, And so they're always wanting to give you something out there, and that's why I love going to State, because I'm gonna go do the ball game, then I'm gonna make my way out in left field lounge after the game and maybe grab an adult beverage and maybe a piece of meat along the way as well.
I remember as a young kid going out there for the first time, and it was in the late 80s, and I can't remember when. But I was tickled to death. I can't even remember who State was playing. But it was a pitching change. And a kid from the opposing team, the center fielder, ran up to the fence and goes, "Hey, give me something to eat." And they gave him 2 hamburgers.
I can remember eating baby back ribs, hamburgers. I mean, just a little bit of everything out there, But that's what I loved about that place. I always used to look forward to going there as a ball player, and more forward to calling games there now, because it's a different kind of place. It's just different there, and it's the only place in the whole country that is like that. And so that's why it's such a unique place.
I'll give you a little pro tip. If you happen to call a regional there this year, find the team that's geographically the furthest team away. That will be the favorite team that folks will pick from the State fans, and they will treat those guys like royal. And heaven forbid if they're from a small school. They will just embarrass them with gifts and riches of food and good times and everything else. So
I'm glad you told me that, because I'm gonna go hang out with the furthest team away. I can promise you that. I'm gonna walk through the line with them.
So, hey, real quick, we're talking about Major League Baseball and everything. You played with the Brewers. You got a Bob Uecker story for us.
Man, Bob Uecker. I played with the Brewers for 2 years, and I'm going to tell you, we weren't very good. But what made us better was Bob Uecker. And I've always Bob Uecker, I mean, we would get off the airplane to get on the bus to go to the hotel at 9 o'clock at night or whatever, and there'd be 100 people at the door waiting. We thought to get autographs from the players. They didn't want autographs from us. We would walk right by them. They were waiting to see Bob Uecker and get a picture with Bob Uecker or get an autograph from Bob Uecker. He sat on the front of the plane, the front of the bus. He was in charge of everything. And I'm thinking to myself, I knew who Bob Uecker was, but I had no idea when I went over there from Baltimore that he was that popular of a guy, But you go back and look at all the light beer commercials and all the things over the years, man. He's a funny dude and a very talented dude that's had an unbelievable career broadcasting.
Hey, let's talk about that gold medal team real quick. You guys played, of course, if I'm not mistaken, you guys trained out in Millington, Tennessee, or outside of Memphis. But I remember you guys played a game at Tim McCarver Stadium there in Memphis. The old Memphis Chicks used to play there. But I remember catching you guys. I was probably late grade school. I'm 45 years old now. But I remember just being amazed. I've always heard stories of Jim Abbott. We got to see him pitch that night. But if I'm not mistaken, John Olerud was on that team.
Olerud was not on that team. Okay. I don't know what happened. He might have denied the invitation. I don't know why he wasn't on that team, but he didn't, or he came and didn't make it, but he wasn't on that team. But Jim Abbott, man, I tell you what, you talk about an inspiration to everybody, you know, and a hell of an athlete. I mean, Jim played football, quarterback. He played basketball in high school. And, of course, he played baseball. He was all-state in baseball, I think, and football and all-district in basketball. And he was just a heck of an athlete, man. And I was amazed at just watching him, the way he could throw. You know, he would throw the ball and quickly put the glove and be able to switch it back over and put it on to field the ball that came back to him. That's how good he was at doing that, you know. And so it was really cool to experience that summer with that bunch of guys. And, you know, now it's like a week or two thing, but Team USA that summer was like 60 ball games. Like we had a USA tour, we went to Japan twice. The Olympics were in South Korea. We spent 2 weeks there, 4 weeks in Japan. So it was a long summer for us. So I got to know a lot of those guys really well. And, you know, I'm a big Olympian, always was before I even made an Olympic team. And I used to love the Summer Olympics and even the Winter Olympics, and I always wondered, you know, I got my gold medal hanging up
That's
there.
what I was about to ask you. Where's your gold medal?
Yeah, I got it framed up there. It's with the jersey and everything. And, you know, I always wondered what it would be like to stand on that platform and have somebody drape a gold medal over your neck. As a kid, I used to then go, God, that's got to be the coolest feeling in the world, man, to be able to do that. And then to finally experience it, you know, on foreign soil and stand on the gold medal platform, have them to drape a gold medal over your neck and play the national anthem, man. I'm telling you what, that's probably the highlight of anything I've ever done in sports. It ranks up there with anything, just to, because, you know, it's different, man. When you're wearing the red, white, and blue and it says USA across your chest and you're in Japan or Korea or somewhere, it just means a little bit more, you know. And to go over there with that bunch of guys who we had such a wonderful summer with and be able to go over there and win a gold medal, man, it's like, it doesn't get a whole lot cooler than that.
Hey, what's the funniest story that you can share with us on that gold medal team? What's something that got a little out of hand or a little rowdy?
Probably the coaches. You know, I mean, it's, you know, when you got Skip Bertman and Ron Polk on the same coaching staff and they're assistant coaches and they're going at each other all the time and they're smoking their cigars, which would I remember like yesterday, like they would get on the team bus and Skip would light up a cigar about this big and Pokey's would be about that big. And they would just puff them on the bus, the whole bus ride. And we're back there with players. We got the windows rolled down. We're trying to, I mean, smoke is everywhere. We're hollering, put it out. They're like, shut up, you know. And I mean, that was some of the best times there was in the world. We don't know anything about smoke back then, you know. But those two guys, I mean, one of Skip's favorite stories, he used to mess with Pokey, and he used to say, hey, Pokey, he says, listen, I heard a tornado went through Starkville the other day. Did $20 million worth of improvements. That's what he used to tell Pokey all the time. And Pokey would come back and Skip, and they were wonderful to be around. But look, a wealth of knowledge, you know, with those two guys. And when you got Mark Marcus from Stanford and Skip Bertman, and of course Ron Polk and others coaching a bunch of 20 and 21-year-old kids, it was a valuable summer for us in so many ways.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, let's go back to your actual draft night. I have a question that was just texted to me by my friend who is an LSU fan and an LSU graduate. He wants to know where you were the night you were drafted number one, and what were your thoughts going through your head when you were number one?
Well, here's the story with that. You know, we know the draft has moved several times over the years when they actually have the draft, you know. But back then in '89, the draft was the first day of the College World Series.
Right.
So I'm pitching a game the first day of the College World Series that night. The draft's at noon 1 o'clock Eastern time. So I got to go to a press conference from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock that day and answer a million questions, and then go try to pitch in a ball game 3 hours later. And so it was held on the day. And my initial feeling was, I'm just glad it's over with, right? I mean, because there's so much lead up to it. And I'm trying to pitch us to a World Series title and trying to get us off to a good start. And then I got to go answer questions about the draft. And so I'm glad they're moving the draft. And I think they're going to move it out of the way of everything now, because we've seen it the last couple of years. There's kids on the field playing on a Monday and the draft is going on, and somebody in the fans, hey, you got drafted in the 5th round. And it really should be an experience for the kid and for the family and the team and the coaches, where everybody can experience that together and not have to worry about trying to play baseball on the same day of it, So I think they finally got it right now, and these kids can enjoy some, you only get drafted once for the most part and sign, right? And so they can experience that with their family now, which is going to be really cool. But back then, it was the first day of the College World Series.
Wow. And his other question or statement is, can you give us your thoughts on Cal Ripken?
Wow. He's the Iron Man. I saw that guy and played with him for 7 years. When you think about what he did and how he did it, he played in over 2,600 consecutive games.
Right.
And the first, I think, 8 or 9 years of that, he never even missed an inning of any game. Mustache played in all of them. And he played the position of shortstop, which is arguably one of the most grueling positions, if not other than catcher, on the field, And so to see him go play, and again, he was an inspiration to everybody, to see him go play with the bumps and bruises and torn up and busted up ankles and this, that, and the other was an inspiration. And for whatever reason, Junior took a liking to me. He was a small town guy that came as a pretty high draft pick with a lot of pressure. And so he kind of took me in as a 21-year-old and tried to help me out the best he could. And I'll tell you guys a funny story. I had Chris Hoyles as a catcher, and Chris was 23. It was my second year, my first full year. I was 22. And me and Chris are in the back after a game, scratching our head, and we're drinking a couple of adult beverages, trying to figure this thing out. And Junior sticks his head in the room. He looks around, and wasn't nobody else around. He looks around and he goes, hey, you guys don't have an idea of what you're doing, do you? And I said, no, sir, Mr. Ripken. I said, I don't have a clue of what I'm doing yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. And that's when it's in one of his books, and that's where he came up with the reason. He sat down and had a couple drinks with us and said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start calling every pitch that you throw from shortstop. I said, hold up. I said, how can you do that? He said, just shut up and listen. I said, okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Ripken. He said, I'm going to relay by the way I hold my glove to Chris Hoyles, the catcher, and I'm going to start calling every one of your pitches. And then after every game, we're going to sit down with a beer or two, and I'm going to tell you why I want to throw each one of these guys these pitches in these situations. That's going to be the way you're going to learn. And I said, there is no way in hell this is going to work. And what was funny is I'd be having my glove up, and I'm looking in at the catcher, getting the sign, but I can see the catcher, Chris Hoyles, looking over my right shoulder. He's looking at Ripken for what pitch to throw. And then Ripken would signal to him, and he'd put the fingers down in the location. This went on for every start I made as a 22-year-old kid. And every start we would sit down and we would talk about why we threw certain pitches. And after 1 year, Cal came to me and he said, I think you got it. He said the kicker with him was this. Nobody knows about this triangle right here. The pitching coach doesn't know about it. The manager doesn't know about it. Only us three. That's the only way I'm going to do this, because he didn't want to take credit for it. And I never told anybody. He never told anybody. And then finally, I put it out, years later, and he ended up putting it in his book later on. But he helped my maturing process as a pitcher, as far as understanding how to set up hitters and how to pitch more than anybody. Because he was obviously played so many games in a row, and every inning he knew every hitter and where to position guys better than anybody did. And so he really helped my learning curve speed up by calling pitches for me for 1 year.
Ben, did you ever shake off Cal Ripken Jr.?
Very rarely. Very rarely. But, he told me, he said, listen, and here's what you got to know about pitching. Even if, let's say, fastball is the pitch, but I want to throw my breaking ball, it's still better to throw that breaking ball, because as a pitcher, I have confidence in that pitch. Right. In other words, if a pitching coach puts down a fastball away, but you're thinking breaking ball. You're not going to throw that fastball with conviction and know 100% that that's the pitch, because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I want to throw something else. And so I never really questioned pitch selection as a pitcher or a pitching coach as I do pitch location. In other words, so I can tell you, Stingray, I'm fixing to throw you a curveball right now. But if I throw it down and away and it's a nasty one, and I throw it on the corner where it's supposed to be, the chance of you hitting it are slim and none. Or if you do hit it, you're not going to get the good part of the barrel on it anyway. Or I can say, look, Stingray, I'm throwing you a fastball down and away right now, or a fastball, but I don't tell you where I'm going to throw it, and I paint the outside corner at 95. The chance of you putting good lumber on it, probably slim and none. So that's why I always I don't question the pitch selection so much as I do the location of the pitch.
Hey, Ben, what was your welcome to the Major League Baseball moment? What was the moment you're like, wow, that just happened to me?
I think the first time my first appearance, in the big leagues, I came out of the bullpen, and Frank Robinson, God bless him, he's passed away now, but the old manager of the Baltimore Orioles, he brings me in a first and third situation facing Corey Snyder with Cleveland, who was probably one of the best hitters in the American League at the time. But here the crazy thing was, Curt Schilling was pitching in relief in front of me, and he had Corey Snyder 0-2, and Frank comes out of the dugout and takes Curt out of the game and waves me in the game on an 0-2 pitch with one out. And it was first and third, and I come in the game, he gives me the ball, and there's 46,000 people there. I throw one breaking ball to Corey Snyder. He hits a two-hopper to Cal. He flips it over to Billy at second. We turn a double play, and I'm off the field. I went, oh, my God, is it really this easy? Well, I come to find out it is not that easy. That was one pitch and one double play, but it got harder after that. But the roar of the crowd going in, because there was so much anticipation and everything that went along with it, and then the one pitch and the crowd roars again. But if you've never pitched in front of 45, 50,000 people, or an old Yankee Stadium, 55,000 sometimes, it's pretty loud in there. And, playing in the SEC, these kids are experiencing big-time crowds because, you get 11, 12 over in Starkville, you get 10, 11, 12, whatever, Ole Miss, and in Baton Rouge, and that's loud. But you compare 11 or 12 to 46 or 50, it can be an intimidating thing, But I loved every minute of the big leagues.
Wow. Hey, who was the best hitter you ever faced? What guy gave you the most fits?
Joe Carter, probably.
Wow.
Joe Carter, it seems like I could never get ahead of. There's always a certain team you always pitch good against, no matter who's wearing the jerseys. And there's always a certain team, no matter who's wearing a jersey, you just can't seem to have a good game against. And then there's some guys that just flat out own you, and you can't never get them out, it seems like. And then there's guys that, like the Wade Boggs of the world, some Hall of Famers, I really pitched well against those guys. But like Joe Carter, I could just never get ahead of and make good pitches, and he was a really good fastball hitter. Paul Molitor hit me really well. Ricky Henderson hit me. I finally got to stuck my chest out enough against Ricky Henderson. I was going to be, all right, I've had enough of him wearing me out. I'm fixing to buzz his tower. I'm going to knock him down because I'm tired of this, right? And so, man, I throw a fastball like right here at 95. Just, yow, and Ricky flips backwards and his hat comes off and he's laying on his back and he gets up and he looks at me and I went, that felt pretty good. And so I come back with a next pitch breaking ball. Right? I said, I got him. I'm fixing to buckle him and strike him out because I'm going to start this curveball in the same place I just threw that fastball. Well, I throw a curveball, and look, I hang it. And Ricky goes, pow! And hits it 390 feet to left center field for a home run. So Bob Melvin is my catcher at the time.
Yeah.
And he, managing the Oakland A's right now, and he comes out there and he's like, he said, Ben, look, here's something you got to know about Ricky Henderson. You don't wake him up. Like, you don't tug. It's kind of like when Tyrann Mathieu from LSU was talking smack to Tom Brady the other day. It's like, don't tug on Superman's cape. You just don't do it because ain't nothing good going to come out of it. Well, I tugged on Superman's cape a little bit too much on that one, and he hit it for a home run. So you learn as you go along the guys that you can work on and the guys you can't.
This will be my last Major League Baseball question of the night. I'm a forgive and forget kind of person. I grew up with steroid baseball. I think a lot of those guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. these Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voters, these writers, these baseball writers, I think they get it wrong so many more times. Who are some guys that you think definitely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame from during the times you played?
Well, I'll go back even before that.
Okay.
One of my idols growing up was Charlie Hustle.
Yeah.
Pete Rose. And Pete Rose did wrong. I'm not denying that. He gambled on baseball as a manager. There's no denying that. But he also accumulated over 4,000 hits as a player. And to me, what you do on the field is what really matters to me about the Hall of Fame. And as a baseball player and what he accomplished as a hitter on the field, I'll start right there. I think Charlie Hustle should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Another guy that I played with and was my first roommate in the big leagues is Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling is arguably one of the best, greatest post-game pitchers of all time. And the numbers he put up, the Red Sox in Arizona, but it looks like to me because of maybe political views or some things he's tweeted and said over the years that they're holding that against him, and I don't agree with that. Again, I think it should be what you accomplished while you were a ball player. Has Curt maybe said some things that rubbed some people some wrong way? Absolutely. He said those things. But last time I checked, there is something called freedom of speech too, so he has a right to say, whether you agree with him or not, he has the right to say what he wants to say. But I think he's really getting pushed under the rug, in my opinion, because I think his numbers say that he's good enough to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's not. He didn't make it this year, just barely missed it. But he's one guy that I think should be in. Now, I will say this. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, to me, cheated. They cheated the game.
Okay.
There's no denying that.
Right.
They took advantage, right? But having said that, if I had a vote, I would vote him in. And the reason is I think Barry Bonds, before he allegedly started using, and Roger Clemens, before he started using too, were already Hall of Famers. They already had the numbers to be in the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds already had 500 homers. Roger Clemens already had 3 Cy Youngs before he started using too. So I would vote those guys in. If you ask me if they cheated, I would say yes, they absolutely cheated. But to me, they were already Hall of Fame material before all that happened. Now, there's some guys that are out there that are on the cusp, right, of getting in that we know that used. That's a job for somebody else. I don't know if you could say, did steroids add 50 homers, 20 homers, 100 homers? I think those are questions we never know. So guys like that, may not ever get in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens as these guys start to come forward. But Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Curt Schilling, to name a few, and Pete Rose, to me, if I had a vote, they all 4 would be in my Hall of Fame.
What about Rafael Palmeiro? We all know what happened. We saw the finger wagging. But 600 home runs, 3,000 hits. I mean, he's got the numbers. But
he's got the numbers in spades, man. I mean, that dude, I played with him for 3 or 4 years in Baltimore. And I was as shocked as anybody was when that happened because, there were some guys that I played with that I suspected. It wasn't like Jose Canseco made it sound like where everybody's running around chasing each other with needles in the clubhouse. I never saw any of that happen in my 9 years. I never saw one guy inject another guy. I never saw any of that. But it appears it might have been more out there than what I thought it was, even though I didn't see it. But Raffy was just a regular old 6'1", 190-pound guy. Like, you see him walk around the clubhouse with his shirt off, and he'd be the last guy that I would suspect because he just didn't look like it. There were other guys that were walking around that were bulked up pretty good. You go, well, I know how hard I worked in the offseason. I don't look anything like that dude, And so there were some guys I was skeptical of in the league. Around the league, but Palmeiro was a big shock to me. I love Raffy. He's one of my favorite dudes. He's a hell of a ball player, but that's a great question, and that's what you don't know. You don't know how much it affected those 600 home runs, those 3,000 hits. Could he have done it without it? I don't know, but if you look from a talent standpoint, the numbers he put up, wow. I mean, there ain't many guys around say they got 600 homers or over 500 homers and 3,000 hits. It ain't many guys on that list.
Yeah.
I've got 4 remaining questions for you. One, have you broadcasted a game with Dave Neal? And if so, what is a funny Dave Neal story that you can tell us?
I have broadcasted a few games with Dave. Dave Neal is one of my favorite people to call a game. I just love the way he calls the game. I like to have fun, and I've always said, doing baseball games to me, it has to be fun if I'm talking baseball. Like, I don't want to be all serious. I like to cut up and have a good time. And I don't know if I can recall one funny story other than we had Chris Burke in the SEC tournament. We had me and Dave and Chris Burke were calling the game, and I always make fun of Berkey because, he's about this tall. He's about all he is, and he's a little old bitty dude. But he's like my little brother, and he's got these little short, like alligator arms, and I think I said something on the air about Berkey one time, and Dave Neal got to just cackling and laugh, and I didn't think he was ever going to be able to call the game again. Like, he just broke out into one of those laughs that was going to last forever. So I always cut up with Dave. I have a good time. He's a very talented guy and a lot of fun to work with.
DJ Shockley told us when he calls games, and of course DJ works with him in football, that he's got like 1,000 glasses of sweet tea. Is that the same way in baseball?
Yes, he can. That man can go through the tea. I'm talking about go through, but he's like Stingray. He's lost a bunch of weight. He's gotten in shape now. And congratulations, Stingray. I'm gonna tell you, man. I follow you on social media, and I tell you what, I'm proud of what you. It takes a lot of dedication to do what you did. But Dave Neal lost a ton of weight too, and he kind of did it the same way. Just decided he was going to start exercising a little bit more and eating a little bit better. And so when I saw Dave last year, he was down a whole bunch of weight.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that. And I follow you on social media as well. And I'm going to get off the subject of baseball for a little bit. I noticed around last fall, you were tracking a huge buck on social media. Did you ever get the chance to get him?
I had a couple of them I was chasing. I'm not going to lie to you, but I finally caught up with one. We called him Hightower, and I chased him this was the third year, because all I do is bow hunt, Stingray. Right. I just like the challenge of bow hunt. I used to rifle hunt a lot many years ago, but it's been a long time since I've actually packed a rifle around. So all I do is bow hunt now, and so I hunted this deer for 3 years, and finally, and I probably made 50 hunts trying to kill him. Finally, he made a mistake this year and walked in the bow range, and I was lucky enough to get him. So, yeah, old Hightower finally bit the dust this year. So that's something. Look, I always tell people I have 2 seasons in my life anymore. One's baseball season and one's hunting season, and one runs right into the other, so it's perfect. So that's the only 2 seasons I have anymore.
Right.
So I was going to wrap up, Ben, with a couple of questions about the season.
Okay.
If you had to pick a pitching staff that you had to ride with, not named Florida, who are you going to go with in the SEC?
I could very well say Mississippi State. I think McLeod and Sarantola and, of course, Bednar, I think those 3 guys, while they don't have a lot of experience that we talked about, from a potential point, if you look at a ceiling standpoint, they could end up being as good as anybody in the country. Vanderbilt kind of scares you in some ways because you got Kumar and you got the lighter kid who's going to be a high pick too. But he didn't have much experience either, does the lighter kid too. And I don't know who their number 3 is going to be either. But I think State, if you talk about 1, 2, and 3 across the board, I think they could be as dominant as a pitching staff as we're going to see in the SEC. It's just a matter of how they adapt to big-time SEC situations.
My second question will be this. What lineup is going to be the most deadly in the SEC this year as far as bats?
I would probably say Florida. I think Florida's just deep. I think they're just deep 1 through 9. Although they didn't swing it real well last year, I think, by the reports that we're going off of and some of the new guys that came in, and Judd Fabian's supposed to be the center fielder. He's supposed to be the number 1 position player in the SEC, and people are predicting a giant year for him this year. And, of course, he has all the tools, and maybe that'll happen for him his 3rd year. But if you look at the lineup 1 through 9, I think they could be the deepest lineup out there.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with this. Who, if you had to guess now, and of course everything can change, who's going to be the number 1 arm picked in the MLB draft out of the SEC, and who's going to be the number 1 bat?
Well, it's hard to go against Kumar Rocker just because I love the body size. He's a big physical guy with a big arm, and we know about the breaking ball and an improving changeup. And that's something for him. He's got to get better. That third pitch needs to get a little bit better at the professional level. But what he showed you as a freshman and be able to handle those big-time situations in a regional, in the SEC tournament, into the College World Series, they won the national title. It's hard to think. Now, I think there's some guys out there that may have a bigger upside from him later on, but if I'm drafting and I want a guy that can come in and maybe spend 1 year in the minor leagues and be in the big leagues pitching, I think Kumar could be your guy. From a position player standpoint, you know, everything you read, and I haven't really seen Judd Fabian a lot, but everything you read on him screams a guy that's going to play in the big leagues. And a lot of the predictors out there have Fabian right at the top when it comes to picking a guy in the SEC that's going to be one of the top picks in the country. And right now, he's a 5-tool guy that can run. Of course, he can throw, hit for power, and the glove's pretty good out in center field too.
Are you going to say that Florida wins the SEC this year?
I think if you got to put your finger on one right now, I think because of the depth of their pitching, the experience of their pitching that we talked about, and the depth of their lineup, you know, again, a lot's got to happen. But if I had to put my finger on one team, it would probably be Florida to win the East and win the overall conference championship. But as we talked about, guys, there is so many variables this year. Who can stay healthy? Who stays away from COVID? You know, I mean, one bad weekend where, you know, your Friday and Saturday guy get COVID and your shortstop does too, and all of a sudden you got to go play a weekend series against a ranked opponent. You could get swept that weekend without your stars. And that's going to affect the whole SEC outcome of it. And it's sad to say that, but that's just kind of where we are right now. And so those are the variables you don't know. But assuming everybody stays healthy, yeah, and we don't have that problem, which is not going to happen. It's going to pop up somewhere along the way. You know, I mean, I can vision Mississippi State driving to LSU, and all of a sudden they get a phone call and says half the LSU team has COVID. We're going to reroute y'all to Ole Miss this weekend, and you're going to play Ole Miss. I think something crazy like that could happen too, because maybe Ole Miss's opponent might have been Vanderbilt that weekend, and half their team tests positive, so they can't play. So all of a sudden State turns around and drives up to Oxford and plays Ole Miss. I think you could see something like that happen. But if it's not a big outbreak on your team, and it's just a couple of guys, but those couple of guys are really your dudes, then that could affect your weekend, because then you still got to go play.
And my last question to wrap it up, I'm going to another sport for this because I'm a big college football guy. How do you think your LSU Tigers will do in 2021?
Well, I tell you one thing, they better do better than they did in 2020. That's for sure. You know, I mean, look, that was a tough season to watch for LSU, and there was no excuses. You know, I mean, LSU did not perform well, and everybody said, well, we lost all these. Well, you knew you were going to lose those draft picks. But it didn't look like to me you prepared very well for the next year, you know. And so as dominant as 2019 was, to me, 2020 was dominant in the other direction. Like, it should have never happened. And and I don't want to get LSU fans mad, but if you're going to compare yourself to Alabama, you can't have years like LSU had this year, right? I mean, you just can't have that. But having said that, Orgeron bringing in, I mean, almost all the coaches got fired. So he's bringing in a new coaching staff. But he also brings in another very talented recruiting class again, very talented. And so they were young. There's no doubt about that. They were growing and learning last year, and they had some hiccups along the way, although they finished a little bit stronger last year than, you know, that was a good finish to the season that they had. I suspect they'll be much better. Do they win? You know, are they a factor in the SEC? I don't know if that's going to happen, but they'll be a ranked team. They'll be a much better team. They'll be a much more competitive team than what they were this year.
Yes.
Well, Ben, I'm glad you got the memo. I got the memo to spike my hair up. You got it. Stingray, why didn't you get the memo?
I'm not doing that.
I gotta, you know, keep him falling out. You know, that's what I gotta do now.
That makes two of us.
Ben, look, man, thank you so much for joining us. And real quick, tell people how they can follow you.
Okay, yeah. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm on both of Instagram and Twitter at real Ben McDonald, and I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I'll chat back. I'm always chatting about ball games and stuff, so hit me up on social media.
Well, man, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can do it again soon, man.
Look forward to it. Hey, I appreciate you guys having me, and hopefully we'll see you along the way this year in college baseball.
Yes, sir.
Definitely will. Thank you.
Hopefully we can have you back on during the season.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
Thank you. All right, man. Well, that wraps up our interview with Ben McDonald. And Heath, what did you learn from Ben?
Bob Uecker is a rock star. I think I already knew that, though.
Yes.
So, Ben McDonald's just a wealth of knowledge. I'd love to talk to him. I could have talked to him for an hour straight about that Olympic team that he was on. I could talk to him about his basketball days at LSU, his baseball days at LSU, his time in the minor leagues, time in the major leagues, what he thinks about the Hall of Fame voters, a Major League Baseball writer. I could have talked to Ben an hour on all of those subjects, but the thing that I took away the most is this is going to be the greatest year of college baseball. You know, I suspected it. A lot of people are talking about it. Ben confirmed it for us. This is going to be the absolute greatest year that college baseball will ever see. There's going to be so many teams with, you know, multiple Major League Baseball players on their roster, and they might be put out in the regional, where other years, you know, there would be a front runner in Omaha. There's so much talent in college baseball this year, and due to the pandemic and the draft last year, there's 5 recruiting classes on campus, Stephen.
Yes.
It will be an insane year in college baseball, and I cannot wait.
Absolutely.
The Dogs and Stingray are coming for you.
This is Stephen Ray, a.k.a. Stingray, coming to you live from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Good afternoon, Mr. Feinbaum. Stingray here, and I'm about to shoot the bull with you like all the Auburn students do down at Auburn.
Worst defense ever!
So without further ado,